Hello, everyone. Welcome to True Fear Stories, where you'll be immersed in the story. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And tell us where you are listening from. Enjoy.
The air in Ethan's house had grown heavy over the past week, thick with an unspoken dread that clung to the walls like damp rot. At 16, Ethan was no stranger to the usual suburban monotony of Willow Creek's cul-de-sacs, the hum of lawnmowers, the faint glow of streetlights flickering on at dusk. But something had shifted. The familiar creak of the hardwood floors now sounded deliberate, as if the house itself were watching him. His family, his parents, Mark and Susan, and his younger sister Lily had become strangers in their own skin, their movements too precise, their smiles too sharp. It started small. Last Monday, Ethan noticed his mom's coffee mug sitting untouched on the kitchen counter, the black liquid inside cold and congealed. Susan was a caffeine fiend, always clutching her mug like a lifeline, but that morning she'd stared at the brew with a blank expression before dumping it down the sink. "Tastes wrong," she'd muttered, her voice flat, her eyes catching the light in a way that made them look reflective. Ethan had shrugged it off. Maybe she was just tired. His dad, a middle-aged accountant with a penchant for dad jokes, hadn't laughed at his own puns in days. Instead, he'd sit at the dinner table, fork scraping against his plate, chewing methodically, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the wall. Lily, usually a chatterbox who'd narrate her entire day in excruciating detail, had gone quiet, her crayons abandoned on the living room floor, her drawings now just jagged lines in black and red. By Friday, Ethan's unease had curdled into fear. He lay awake in his bedroom, the digital clock glowing 2:17 a.m., listening to the house breathe. The sounds were wrong too rhythmic, like a mechanical hum beneath the usual groans of settling wood. He crept downstairs, barefoot, the cold floor biting his soles. The kitchen was dark, save for a faint blue glow spilling from the crack under the basement door. His heart thudded as he approached, his hand trembling on the doorknob. He turned it slowly, the hinges silent for once, and descended into the musty darkness. The basement was unfinished, a concrete crypt cluttered with cardboard boxes and old furniture. But tonight, it was different. A pulsating light emanated from the far corner, where a tarp had been hastily draped over something large and irregular. Ethan's breath hitched as he edged closer, the air growing colder, denser, with a metallic tang that coated his tongue. He pulled back the tarp, and his knees buckled. A machine crouched there, its surface slick and organic, like the carapace of a giant insect. Tubes snaked from its core, pulsing with a viscous, luminescent fluid that seemed to writhe with a life of its own. The hum was louder now, vibrating in his chest, syncing with his heartbeat. At its base, a panel flickered with symbol-sharp, angular glyphs that hurt his eyes to look at. Ethan stumbled back, his foot catching on something soft. He looked down and stifled a scream. It was a shoe his dad's loafer, scuffed and familiar, but inside it, a glistening, gelatinous mass oozed, half dissolved, with fragments of bone glinting in the blue light. He bolted upstairs, slamming the basement door behind him, his pulse roaring in his ears. The house was silent, but it felt alive, watching. He grabbed his phone from his room, hands shaking as he typed a text to his best friend, Jake. "Something's wrong with my family. Come over, now." But the message failed to send, the screen flickering with static before going black. Ethan's reflection in the dead screen wasn't his own, it was distorted. His eyes too large, his mouth stretched into a lipless grin. He dropped the phone, the crack of plastic echoing in the stillness. Saturday morning, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, pretending to eat his cereal, the milk souring in his mouth. His family was there, performing their roles with eerie precision. Susan chopped vegetables for lunch, her knife moving in perfect mechanical arcs. Mark read the newspaper, turning pages without looking at them. Lily colored a picture, her crayon strokes too uniform, her eyes unblinking. Ethan's skin crawled as he noticed their hands' fingers too long, joints bending at unnatural angles, nails glinting like polished metal. "Ethan, honey," Susan said, her voice a pitch too high. "You're so quiet today." Her head tilted, a jerky motion like a puppet's, and her smile revealed teeth that were too even, too white. "Is something wrong?" He forced a shrug, his throat tight. "Just tired." Mark lowered the newspaper, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. "You should get more sleep, son," he said, but the word sun sounded wrong, like a foreign syllable he'd practiced but hadn't mastered. Lily giggled, a sound like breaking glass, and held up her drawing. It was Ethanor, something like him, his face a smear of black ink, his body twisted into impossible angles, surrounded by those same angular glyphs from the basement. Ethan excused himself, his legs unsteady as he retreated to his room. He locked the door, shoving his dresser against it, though he knew it wouldn't hold. His mind raced, piecing together the fragments, the cold coffee, the lifeless jokes, the basement machine, the shoe. His family was gone, replaced by things wearing their skins. Aliens, his brain supplied, the word absurd, yet undeniable. He'd seen enough sci-fi movies to recognize the tropes, but this wasn't a movie. This was his life, unraveling in real time. He tore through his closet, grabbing a backpack and stuffing it with essentials. A flashlight, a pocket knife, his hoodie. He needed to get out, to find help. But where? The police? Jake? His phone was dead and the landline downstairs had been silent for days. He glanced out his window, the street below eerily empty, the neighbors' houses dark despite the morning sun. A shadow moved in the yard next door, too tall, too thin, its limbs bending in ways that defied anatomy. Ethan ducked, his breath shallow, his heart a hammer against his ribs. Night fell, and the house grew colder, the hum from the basement now a constant drone that seeped into his bones. Ethan crouched in his room, the flashlight's beam cutting through the dark. He'd heard them moving downstairs, footsteps too heavy, voices too low, speaking in a language of clicks and hisses. They knocked on his door earlier, Susan's voice calling his name, but it was wrong, layered with a static undertone that made his ears ache. "Ethan, come down for dinner," she'd said, and something had scratched at the wood, long and deliberate. He knew he couldn't stay. The window was his only shot. He eased it open, the night air sharp and biting, and climbed onto the roof, the shingles rough under his palms. The street was still empty, the stars above too bright, arranged in unfamiliar patterns. He shimmied along the gutter, his backpack heavy, and dropped to the ground, his sneakers crunching on gravel. He ran, his bike abandoned in the garage, his legs pumping as he headed for the woods behind Willow Creek, the only place he could think to hide. The forest was dense, the trees skeletal in the moonlight, their branches clawing at the sky. Ethan's flashlight flickered, its beam catching glints of frost on the levasseur. Were they scales? He pushed deeper, his breath fogging, his lungs burning. The hum followed him, faint but relentless, vibrating in his teeth. He stumbled, his foot sinking into something slick. He swung the flashlight down, and his stomach heaved. It was a deer, or had Bennett's body split open, its organs replaced by writhing, black-threaded tendrils that pulsed in time with the hum. Its eyes, still wet, stared at him, and its jaw twitched, mouthing silent words. Ethan ran faster, branches snapping at his face, drawing blood that felt too cold as it trickled down his cheek. He didn't know where he was going until he reached the old quarry, its edge a sheer drop into inky blackness. He collapsed, gasping, his flashlight rolling to a stop. The hum was louder now, closing in, and he heard them footsteps, too many, moving through the trees with a predator's grace. He turned, and they were there. His family, or what wore their faces, stood at the edge of the clearing. Susan's skin glistened, too smooth, her eyes reflecting the moonlight like twin mirrors. Mark's mouth opened, revealing rows of needle-like teeth, his tongue a writhing black mass. Lily held her drawing, its lines glowing faintly, the glyphs pulsing in sync with the hum. Behind them, others emerged, neighbors, teachers, faces Ethan knew, all wrong, all other. "Ethan," Susan said, her voice a chorus of whispers, "you can't run, you're part of us now." He scrambled back, his heels scraping the quarry's edge, loose stones tumbling into the void. The pocket knife was in his hand, useless but heavy, its blade catching the light. He didn't want to die, but he wouldn't become like them. The hum was inside him now, burrowing into his skull, and he felt his fingers twitch, his joints ache, as if something were reshaping him from within. With a scream, Ethan lunged forward, slashing at Susan's outstretched hand. The blade sank into her flesh, but no blood came, just a thick, silvery ichor that burned his skin. She didn't flinch, her smile widening, and the others closed in, their limbs elongating, their faces splitting into impossible maws. Ethan stumbled back, his foot slipping, and the world tilted as he fell into the quarry's depths, the hum swallowing his scream. The forest went silent, the stars above unblinking. In Willow Creek, the houses stayed dark, the streets empty. And in Ethan's room, the dresser still blocked the door, the flashlight's beam frozen on the wall, its batteries long dead.